Mark Bennett had always been a man of quiet strength. A former Army Ranger, his years in service had left him with both physical scars and memories that weighed heavily on his heart. The roadside explosion in Afghanistan that cost him his right leg and left arm would forever change the course of his life. Yet, despite the immense challenges, Mark carried himself with dignity and resilience that few could match. Today, he found himself at the bustling city airport, navigating the crowded terminals in his wheelchair. The familiar hum of travelers rushing by, the echo of announcements overhead, and the blur of hurried footsteps were all part of the chaos he had learned to live with. But this trip was different. It was not just a journey from one city to another. It was a mission to reconnect with his estranged daughter, Emily, who he hadn't seen in over 3 years. Mark's hands trembled slightly as he clutched his boarding pass. His prosthetic leg clicked softly against the floor each time he shifted position. The airline had promised accommodations, but nothing could fully prepare him for the practical realities of travel with disabilities. He was hopeful, though, hopeful that his status as a veteran might open a door. A small kindness, a seat upgrade, anything to ease the discomfort that came with long flights. At the ticket counter, Mark smiled politely at the airline clerk, a young woman with tired eyes and a forced smile. "Good morning," he began. "I'm hoping there's a chance to upgrade my seat. I'm a disabled veteran traveling to see my daughter." The clerk glanced briefly at his ID badge and then back at her screen. Her smile faltered. "I'm sorry, sir, but all upgrades have been assigned. Economy it is." There was no warmth in her voice, only a bureaucratic finality that stung more than Mark expected. He nodded, holding back a surge of disappointment. "I understand. Thank you." Around him, travelers shuffled past, some casting curious glances. Mark could feel their eyes, some sympathetic, others indifferent. As he wheeled himself toward the security line, a flood of memories washed over him. The grueling training, the camaraderie of his unit, the harrowing days in a foreign land, all contrasted sharply with this cold, indifferent airport terminal. How could a man who'd risked everything for his country be met with such apathy? Mark's mind drifted to Emily. She was his reason for making this trip, his anchor through the storm of life's challenges. The thought gave him strength as he maneuvered through the crowd, determined to make this journey worth it, no matter the obstacles. Little did Mark know, the events that would unfold in the next few minutes would not only change his day, but would send ripples far beyond the confines of this terminal. A simple refusal would ignite a series of moments that revealed the best and worst of human nature. For now, Mark Bennett was just a man in a wheelchair, pushing forward with quiet resolve, ready to face whatever came next. Mark wheeled himself closer to the counter, where the airline agent had just dismissed his request with a curt, emotionless reply. The airport buzzed around him, a cacophony of footsteps, chatter, and announcements that somehow seemed louder and more overwhelming today. The cold refusal still echoed in his mind. "All upgrades have been assigned." A bureaucratic sentence that felt like a blade slicing through years of service and sacrifice. He glanced around, hoping maybe someone nearby would offer a kind word or a gesture of understanding. But the faces were either buried in their phones or absorbed in their own worlds, oblivious to the quiet storm building inside him. Even the airline agent was already distracted, typing briskly on her keyboard, barely acknowledging his presence anymore. Mark's hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair a little tighter. He had learned to swallow disappointment over the years, but this felt different. This was not just about a seat upgrade. It was about respect, about acknowledgement of everything he had given. The limp of his prosthetic leg, the scars visible beneath his jacket, the ID card hanging from his neck, all told a story that should have mattered. He took a deep breath, steadying himself as the memories flooded in uninvited. The blistering heat of the desert sun during his deployment, the crackle of radio static late into the night, the sound of comrades calling for help in chaos. He had faced dangers far worse than a cold shoulder at an airport. Still, it stung. A soft cough from behind caught his attention. Mark turned to see a woman in her mid-30s, wearing a plain sweater and jeans. Her eyes were kind, but she seemed hesitant. "Excuse me, sir," she said gently. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Some of us do appreciate what you've done." Mark offered a tired smile. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means a lot." The woman nodded, then glanced back toward the counter, where the agent was now speaking on the phone. Mark caught fragments of the conversation. "No special treatment. Protocol. Nothing to be done." The words hung in the air like an unyielding wall. Nearby, a group of travelers whispered among themselves. Some expressed quiet disapproval of the agent's harshness, while others shrugged as if indifferent. One elderly man muttered, "People don't know what sacrifice really means anymore." Another young man, probably in his 20s, simply looked away, uncomfortable with the tension, but unwilling to intervene. Mark felt the sting of invisibility, the feeling that no matter what he'd endured, today, he was just another passenger, the veteran discount card in his wallet, the countless medals he had earned, the years spent defending his country, all reduced to a mere footnote in a ledger of airline policy. He wheeled toward a nearby bench, grateful when a kind stranger helped him settle in. The ache in his joints was beginning to build, a reminder that his body was no longer what it used to be. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to block out the hurt, but the silence was broken by another memory, his daughter's voice. Emily, with her stubborn kindness, had once told him, "Dad, you're stronger than anyone I know. Don't let anyone make you feel less." Those words had kept him going during the darkest nights in the hospital and the lonely days afterward. Mark opened his eyes and looked around once more. The terminal was still busy, but the atmosphere felt heavier now. The polite smiles of strangers, the routine bustle, none of it masked the truth. In that moment, Mark realized the battle he faced wasn't just physical, it was for recognition, for dignity. A flight announcement crackled overhead. Flight 207 to Chicago now boarding at Gate 14. Mark gathered his strength and wheeled toward the gate, refusing to let bitterness consume him. As he approached, a flight attendant noticed his struggle and offered a helping hand, her expression warm and genuine. "Sir, can I assist you with anything?" she asked kindly. "Just a seat," Mark replied with a weary smile. "But I'm not expecting miracles." The attendant's eyes softened. "I'll do my best." But as Mark found his place in the crowded economy cabin, the cramped space and lack of accommodations reminded him of the uphill battle. Passengers shuffled past, some offering brief nods, others unaware or uncaring. Despite the discomfort, Mark remained composed, determined to endure. His journey was far from over, not just the flight, but the fight for respect that seemed to have lost its place in a world rushing forward without pause. Unbeknownst to Mark, however, the moments ahead would bring an unexpected turn. A captain's footsteps, a voice filled with conviction, and a gesture that would ripple through the cabin and beyond, turning this day of cold refusal into a story of redemption. For now, Mark settled into his seat, the weight of rejection still pressing down, but a flicker of hope flickering quietly beneath. The hum of the engines was meant to soothe, but for Mark, the airplane cabin felt more like a cage. The cramped economy seat was unforgiving, and the space for his wheelchair had been awkwardly rearranged to fit somewhere near the rear of the plane. His prosthetic leg, still stiff from the day's journey, pressed uncomfortably against the metal frame beneath the seat. Around him, passengers settled in with varying degrees of excitement, exhaustion, or impatience. The flight attendant who had helped Mark earlier came by again, offering a reassuring smile. "If you need anything, just press the call button, okay?" she said softly. Mark nodded, grateful for the small kindness. Minutes later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a slight delay due to technical inspections. I apologize for the inconvenience, and we'll keep you updated as we work to get you safely on your way." Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Some passengers sighed loudly, checking their watches or scrolling through their phones. The energy shifted, impatience rising like an undercurrent beneath polite conversation. Mark felt the tension too. The delay meant more time confined to this tight space, more discomfort, and more uncertainty. His thoughts drifted again to his daughter, the reunion he was so desperate to have, and the frustration of being stuck in limbo. Nearby, a young couple argued quietly about missing a connecting flight. A businessman tapped his fingers anxiously on his laptop. A child in the row ahead fussed for his parents' attention. The cabin was full of stories like Mark's, each passenger wrestling with their own hopes and worries. As time dragged on, some passengers began to notice Mark's discomfort. A few shot sympathetic glances his way, but no one spoke out loud. The invisible wall between him and the others seemed to grow thicker. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered, and the seatbelt sign chimed on again. The flight attendant announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're still waiting on clearance from maintenance. Please remain seated." Mark sighed, feeling the tightness in his chest grow. He pressed the call button gently, and the attendant quickly came over. Are you all right, sir? I'm managing, thank you, Mark replied, his voice calm but tinged with fatigue. Just hoping we can get moving soon. The attendant gave a warm smile. We'll do everything we can. But behind the scenes, the delay was stretching on longer than anyone had expected. Passengers grew restless. Whispered complaints turned louder. Phones buzzed with urgent calls, and the mood shifted from irritation to something sharper, resentment. Mark caught snippets of conversations, words like waste of time, poor service, and not worth it. He felt their anger like a wave crashing around him, isolating him further. Some passengers looked his way now, not with sympathy, but with impatience, as if he somehow embodied the delay itself. A young woman near the aisle muttered loudly, "Why should they cater to someone who's just trying to get a free upgrade? Everyone else has plans, you know." Mark's heart sank. The ignorance of that comment hit harder than the earlier refusal at the ticket counter. He wanted to speak up, to explain, but the words stuck in his throat. How could he make them understand? How could he make them see that this wasn't about freebies or special favors? It was about dignity and respect for sacrifices made. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply to steady himself. The flight attendant returned with a bottle of water, placing it gently on the tray table. "You're not alone in this, sir," she whispered. "I see you." That small act of kindness was a lifeline amid the growing tension, but the weight of the moment lingered, heavy and suffocating. Just when it seemed the atmosphere couldn't grow any more strained, the cabin door slid open near the cockpit. Footsteps echoed down the aisle. A tall man in uniform appeared, the captain himself. Heads turned, conversations hushed. Mark looked up, surprised but cautious. The captain stopped beside Mark's seat, his expression serious but kind. "Sir," he said quietly, "I've heard about your situation." The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. This moment, unexpected and profound, would soon shift everything. The cold dismissal, the mounting frustration, and the invisible walls of indifference were about to be broken down by a single act of recognition and respect. Mark met the captain's eyes, a flicker of hope igniting deep inside him. The journey was far from over, but maybe, just maybe, the tide was turning. The cabin, which had been filled moments ago with the restless murmurs of frustrated passengers, fell suddenly silent as the captain stood beside Mark's seat. His uniform was crisp, the insignia on his shoulders gleaming under the overhead lights. His presence commanded attention, not the kind born of authority alone, but of genuine empathy. "Sir," the captain began, his voice low but steady, "I want to apologize for the way you were treated earlier. That's not how we honor our veterans here." He paused, letting the words sink in. Mark's eyes met the captain's, and in that gaze, he saw something he hadn't expected, a sincere respect, a recognition that had been missing all day. The passengers around them shifted, some watching intently, others whispering quietly to their neighbors. The atmosphere changed palpably. What had started as a day, marked by neglect, was beginning to transform into something hopeful. The captain continued, "I understand you requested an upgrade and were denied. That was wrong. I am going to fix this immediately." Before Mark could respond, the captain turned and called for the lead flight attendant. "Please assist in moving this gentleman to first class as soon as possible." A ripple of surprise and murmurs swept through the van. Some passengers nodded approvingly. Others whispered quietly, clearly moved by the captain's gesture. Mark felt a surge of emotion welling up inside him. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. Tears of relief, gratitude, and a rekindled pride. For years, he had been fighting battles far away from home, but this small act of recognition meant more than words could express. As the flight attendants carefully helped Mark to his new seat in first class, passengers began to applaud softly, their earlier impatience replaced by respect. A few people approached him quietly, offering apologies or simple words of thanks. One elderly woman leaned down and whispered, "Thank you for your service." Mark smiled, nodding humbly. "Thank you. That means everything." The captain returned to the cockpit but remained visible through the door's window, watching the cabin with a thoughtful expression. His decision was more than protocol. It was a personal commitment to change. Over the next few minutes, he addressed the passengers once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a moment to recognize the sacrifices made by our veterans. It is our duty and honor to serve them with the utmost respect. I apologize for any disrespect you may have witnessed today. Let us all remember the people behind the uniforms and the stories they carry." The cabin erupted into applause again, louder this time and filled with genuine warmth. Mark settled into his seat, the plush cushioning and extra space a stark contrast to his earlier confinement. Yet beyond the comfort, it was the human kindness that made the greatest difference. He thought of Emily, imagining her smile when he finally reached her. This moment, the captain's intervention, was a reminder that even in the face of coldness, compassion could prevail. As the plane finally prepared for takeoff, the flight attendants moved through the aisles with renewed energy and kindness. Passengers were friendlier, smiles more genuine. Mark closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. This wasn't just a flight. It was a journey from dismissal to dignity, and all it had taken was one man stepping forward. The engines roared to life, the aircraft finally pushing back from the gate. Mark sat comfortably in the spacious first-class seat, the tension that had gripped him earlier easing with each passing minute. The captain's unexpected intervention had transformed what began as a discouraging day into something hopeful, a gesture of honor that felt long overdue. As the plane ascended, Mark gazed out the window, the patchwork of city lights shrinking beneath the clouds. His thoughts drifted to his daughter, Emily, and the long-awaited reunion that awaited him. This trip was more than just a visit. It was a chance to rebuild a relationship strained by years of absence and hardship. The kindness he had received on this flight gave him a renewed sense of courage. Back in the cabin, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Passengers, once restless and impatient, were now calmer and more considerate. Some offered smiles and nods of respect as they passed by Mark's seat. The small acts of recognition reminded him that empathy, even in the most unlikely places, still existed. The captain returned from the cockpit during a lull in the flight and approached Mark once more. "Sir, I just wanted to personally thank you for your service," he said, shaking Mark's hand firmly. "You deserve every bit of respect and more." Mark's eyes misted over. "Thank you, Captain. That means the world to me." Word of the captain's actions had quietly spread among the crew, sparking a shift in how they interacted with all passengers, especially those with disabilities or special needs. Flight attendants checked in more frequently with Mark, ensuring his comfort and attending to any requests promptly. It was clear that the captain's message had reignited a culture of care on board. As the hours passed, Mark reflected on the journey he'd taken, both literal and emotional. He remembered the moment he first asked for an upgrade and the dismissive refusal that followed. The sting of disrespect was sharp, but the captain's arrival had shown that change was possible. Later, as the plane began its descent, the captain made an announcement that brought warmth to everyone's hearts. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we prepare to land, I want to acknowledge all veterans on board today. Thank you for your sacrifices and service. It is our privilege to fly you safely to your destinations." A round of applause filled the cabin once more, this time richer and more heartfelt than before. Upon landing, Mark was assisted off the plane with the same dignity and care he had been shown in the air. Airport staff, aware of the story circulating among the crew, greeted him with respect and offered assistance through customs and baggage claim. Outside the terminal, the bright sunlight felt like a new beginning. Mark wheeled himself toward the awaiting shuttle, his heart lighter than it had been in months. The captain's simple yet profound act had restored not only his place on the plane, but also his faith in humanity. As the shuttle pulled away, Mark pulled out his phone and called Emily. Hearing her voice, warm and excited, was the perfect end to a day that had tested his patience and spirit. "I'm on my way, Emily. We'll see each other soon," he said softly. And for the first time in a long while, Mark believed that this journey, born from rejection and delay, was truly a step toward healing. The story of Mark's experience aboard Flight 207 didn't end when the plane touched down. In fact, it was just the beginning of a ripple effect that would reach far beyond the confines of the airport terminal. News of the captain's compassionate intervention spread quickly, first among the airline staff, then through social media, and eventually catching the attention of airline executives. Passengers who had witnessed the moment shared their own accounts online, praising the captain's respect and empathy. The narrative struck a chord across the veteran community and with anyone who believed in fairness and dignity. Within days, the airline issued a formal statement acknowledging the incident. The company apologized for the initial mishandling of Mark's upgrade request and vowed to improve their policies concerning veterans and passengers with disabilities. The airline's CEO, in a video message that was shared widely, said, "We deeply regret the experience that one of our veterans faced. We are committed to ensuring that all veterans receive the respect and accommodations they deserve when traveling with us." Behind the scenes, the company began implementing training programs for their frontline employees to better understand the needs of disabled veterans and other passengers requiring assistance. This included sensitivity training and clearer guidelines about eligibility for upgrades and priority seating. Mark, meanwhile, became something of an unofficial ambassador for the airline's new initiatives. He was invited to speak at company events and to share his story with staff across multiple hubs. His honest reflections about both the challenges and the moments of kindness during his journey inspired many employees to reconsider their approach to customer service. The impact was visible within months. Reports from passengers noted a more compassionate and accommodating atmosphere, especially for veterans traveling with disabilities. Mark's story had helped to humanize a system that, for too long, had been seen as cold and impersonal. The airline also established a special Veterans Advisory Council, with Mark as one of the founding members. The council worked closely with leadership to identify ongoing issues and ensure continuous improvement. For Mark, the journey had transformed from one of frustration and neglect into a powerful opportunity to make a difference. The captain's simple act of kindness had not only restored his faith, but had sparked a wave of change that would benefit countless others. Looking back, Mark realized that his day at the airport was not just a personal story. It was a catalyst for progress, a reminder that dignity must never be an afterthought. As he prepared for future trips, Mark felt a renewed sense of hope. He knew the fight for respect and recognition was ongoing, but he was no longer alone. Together with allies like the captain and the airline's leadership, he was part of something bigger, a movement toward true honor for those who serve. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe. More real, powerful moments like this await you every day.